I am in the production business. I understand what is worth doing for ratings. I understand what is worth doing when the industry is canceling one black guy. I know what happens when they are going to elevate another. And I know what happens when they don't care about either. This is how quarterbacking goes. So the question is, hey, your quarterback just got sacked. Did we know we was fin to sack your quarterback? We absolutely did. It was a play, buddy. We've been rehearsing it, working it out, making sure that at some point, when you get to this level, we can make sure we knock you from a $20 million man to putting in the news that people won't hire you no more and your career is done. I'm saying that everything that happens in a business that's based off of pretend, that seems like a setup is.
Everything that happens in a business, everything that happens in a business that's based off of pretend, that seems like a setup is.
Yes.
You ever hear a story so wild it makes you pause the video, rewind, and ask yourself, wait, did they really just say that? Yeah, this is one of those. Because right now, according to whispers floating through the industry, something way bigger than a simple rap feud might be hiding in plain sight. And if even a fraction of what's being alleged is true, then what we thought was just another headline involving Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane could actually be part of a much deeper, much darker play. And then, out of nowhere, Katt Williams steps in, not with jokes, but with a story that has people online saying, nah, this can't be real. We're talking about claims of setups, carefully timed moves, industry pressure, the kind of behind-the-scenes decisions that, allegedly, can turn a rising star into yesterday's news overnight. But here's the real question. Was this just another situation that spiraled out of control? Or was it something that had already been planned long before anyone hit record? Because think about it. How does someone go from being on top of the world to being at the center of chaos that fast? Coincidence? Maybe. Bad decisions? Possibly. Or something else entirely? Now, before we go any further, nothing in this video is being presented as confirmed fact. This is based on circulating reports, online discussions, and what sources are claiming behind the scenes. But when the same narrative keeps popping up from different directions, you have to at least ask the question, what are we really looking at here? Because if this was all just random, it wouldn't feel this calculated. And trust me, by the time we're done, you might start seeing this whole situation very differently. The internet has a strange way of turning whispers into earthquakes. One moment it's just a random clip, a half-heard sentence, a comment section going crazy. And the next moment, the entire culture feels like it's standing on a cracking floor, trying to figure out what is real and what is just entertainment dressed as truth. And that's exactly where this story begins. Because right now, the names at the center of this storm are not small. We're talking about Katt Williams, a man already known for shaking up conversations in entertainment whenever he speaks. We're talking about Pooh Shiesty, a young artist whose rise in the rap game was fast, loud, and heavily watched. And then there's Gucci Mane, a figure who has survived decades in the industry, built a legacy, and stayed at the center of hip-hop conversations for years. Now, individually, each of these names already carries weight. But together, in the same narrative, that's where things start to feel like a movie that nobody remembers auditioning for. According to circulating online discussions, edited clips, and heavily debated commentary segments, a story has been forming around statements attributed to Katt Williams in a private conversation setting. Nothing officially confirmed. Nothing verified. But in today's internet culture, confirmation sometimes comes after the chaos. And the chaos here is loud. The alleged idea being pushed across social platforms is not simple. It's not just industry drama or rapper conflict. It's something far more layered, suggesting that behind the scenes of fame, there are deeper systems of pressure, timing, and control that the public never gets to see. Some online viewers describe it as industry politics taken too far. Others call it overthinking entertainment culture. And a growing group insists its patterns repeating in plain sight. But what makes this situation different is not just the names involved. It's the way the narrative keeps evolving every time it's retold. One version says Katt Williams was speaking about how the entertainment industry operates like a machine, where timing, image, and public perception are carefully managed. Another version exaggerates those statements into something far more dramatic, suggesting hidden structures and unseen decisions behind public careers. And somewhere in between those versions, the internet does what it always does. It fills in the gaps with imagination. And that's where Pooh Shiesty's name enters the conversation. Not through official statements, not through direct interviews, but through commentary threads, reaction videos, and speculation-heavy breakdowns that connect unrelated dots and turn them into a full picture. People began asking questions like, why do certain artists rise so quickly? Why do certain conflicts get more attention than others? Why do some stories dominate headlines while others disappear overnight? None of these questions have clear answers. But online culture doesn't always need answers. It just needs momentum. And momentum is exactly what this story has. Now, when Gucci Mane is added into the mix, the narrative becomes even more complicated. Because he represents longevity in an industry where careers are often short-lived. He represents survival in a space that constantly evolves. And because of that, he naturally becomes a reference point whenever discussions about the music industry system come up online. But again, it's important to slow this down. There are no confirmed statements linking these individuals in any official capacity regarding the dramatic claims circulating online. What exists instead is a growing web of commentary, reaction content, and heavily interpreted discussions that have been amplified through social media platforms. And yet, the audience doesn't really care about that distinction anymore, because what they are reacting to is not just facts, it's storytelling. And this story has everything: a respected comedian allegedly speaking out, a young rapper surrounded by rising controversy narratives, a veteran artist constantly used as a reference point for industry survival, and an internet culture that thrives on turning uncertainty into entertainment. At one point in the circulating clips, Katt Williams is described as speaking about how the entertainment business is not just about talent, but also about perception, timing, and decisions made behind closed doors. That alone is enough to spark debate. But when those words are clipped, edited, and reposted without context, they begin to transform into something else entirely. They become fuel. And that fuel spreads fast. Comment sections start splitting into sides. Some people interpret the narrative as truth finally being spoken. Others dismiss it as comedic exaggeration being taken too seriously. And then, there's the third group, the most dangerous for viral content. The ones who don't know what to believe, but can't stop watching anyway. Because uncertainty is addictive. And this story is built on uncertainty. As the discussion grows, older clips of interviews, past controversies, and unrelated industry moments are suddenly pulled into the same conversation. Moments that were once separate begin to feel connected simply because the internet decided to connect them. That's how modern digital storytelling works, not through verified timelines, but through emotional alignment. And right now, the emotional tone of this story is confusion mixed with curiosity. People aren't just asking what happened. They're asking what if. And that question is where everything starts to spiral. Because once what if enters the conversation, facts stop being the main driver of attention. Curiosity takes over. And curiosity doesn't require confirmation. It only requires possibility. This is exactly why the names in this narrative keep circulating together, even without official linkage. It's not about evidence. It's about engagement. It's about how easily a story can evolve once it enters the algorithm. And as this narrative continues to grow, one thing becomes clear. We are no longer just watching a discussion. We are watching a digital myth being constructed in real time. And according to the way online conversations are developing, this is only the beginning of the breakdown. Because the deeper this story goes, the more layers people start claiming exist beneath it. And what starts as a simple commentary clip slowly turns into something much bigger than anyone originally expected. And right at this point, where confusion peaks and curiosity takes over, the narrative doesn't slow down. It escalates. And that's where everything shifts into the next stage. Once a story reaches this stage online, it stops being just content and starts behaving like a living organism. It grows, it mutates, and most importantly, it feeds on attention. And that's exactly what happened next. As the discussion around Katt Williams continued to circulate across platforms, new layers of interpretation began appearing almost daily. Not official updates, not verified reports, but commentary upon commentary, each one adding a slightly more dramatic angle than the last. At this point, the narrative involving Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane had already evolved far beyond its original form. What started as general industry discussion was now being treated like a full-scale hidden story by certain corners of the internet. And here's where things got interesting. People weren't just replaying clips anymore, they were analyzing them like puzzle pieces. Every pause in speech, every phrase taken out of context, every emotional tone shift. All of it was being examined as if it contained hidden meaning. Some viewers claimed that Katt's commentary, especially the more intense segments, sounded like he was describing a system within entertainment that the public doesn't normally see. Others pushed back, saying it was simply metaphorical storytelling mixed with performance-style exaggeration. But online, nuance rarely survives. And so the narrative expanded. Suddenly, anonymous accounts began posting breakdowns of industry behavior patterns. Some described rapid artist rise and fall cycles as suspicious. Others pointed to long-standing rumors about label politics and internal competition. None of these posts were confirmed, but they didn't need to be, because they were emotionally aligned with what people were already starting to believe. And belief is more powerful than proof in viral culture. At the same time, reaction content exploded. Commentary creators started stitching together unrelated interviews, public appearances, and old controversies, framing them under one unified question: is there more going on behind the scenes than we realize? And every video added fuel. The more content that was created, the stronger the perception became that something bigger must exist, even if nobody could define what that bigger actually was. Meanwhile, discussions around Pooh Shiesty began to shift tone. Instead of focusing on his music or career trajectory, people began inserting him into speculative narratives about industry pressure, decision-making, and conflict resolution within entertainment spaces. Again, none of this came from verified statements. It came from interpretation stacking on top of interpretation. And once that happens, narratives become self-sustaining. Gucci Mane's name also continued to surface in conversations, not because of new developments, but because he has become a long-standing reference point whenever people talk about survival, evolution, and longevity in the music industry. In this case, his presence in the discussion was more symbolic than direct, a kind of anchor figure people use when trying to explain complex industry dynamics. But symbolism is dangerous in viral storytelling, because symbols get misread easily. As the online debate intensified, something subtle started happening. The tone shifted from curiosity to certainty. Not factual certainty, but emotional certainty. People stopped saying what if and started saying this explains everything. And that's the moment where internet narratives become unpredictable. Because once an audience believes they are uncovering hidden structure, every new piece of information, no matter how unrelated, starts to feel connected. Even silence becomes evidence. Even absence becomes meaning. In this environment, Katt Williams' name continued to function like a catalyst. His reputation for outspoken commentary made him an easy reference point for discussions about industry transparency, even when no direct statement could be confirmed in the way it was being described online. And that's where the distortion grows. Because in digital culture, attribution doesn't have to be accurate to be effective. It just has to be repeatable. And this story was being repeated everywhere. But as the narrative expanded, so did the backlash. A growing number of viewers began questioning the direction of the conversation entirely. They pointed out that the more dramatic interpretations lacked grounding, that the story was becoming increasingly speculative, and that entertainment discourse was being blurred with conspiracy-style framing. Yet even criticism didn't slow it down. If anything, it amplified it. Because conflict drives engagement. And engagement is what algorithms reward. So the cycle continued: clip, reaction, breakdown, debate, escalation, reinterpretation. And each cycle pushed the story further away from its original context. At this point, even casual viewers who had no prior interest in any of the individuals involved were beginning to encounter the narrative through recommendation feeds. And once a story reaches that level of exposure, it no longer belongs to its origin. It belongs to the internet. And the internet rarely tells a story the same way twice. As this momentum built, discussion started shifting toward consequences, real or imagined. Some viewers speculated about reputational impact. Others talked about industry response behavior in similar past situations. A few even began framing the entire narrative as a reflection of how quickly information can evolve in the digital age. But no matter the interpretation, one thing was clear. The story was no longer static. It was accelerating. And in the next stage, the conversation would move beyond interpretation, into imagined fallout, imagined responses, and imagined consequences that feel just real enough to keep people watching. Because once a narrative reaches this level of intensity, the final act is never about truth. It's about impact. And impact is exactly where this story heads next. By the time a story reaches its final stage in the internet cycle, it stops being about what was said and becomes about what people think it means. And that's exactly where this narrative now finds itself. The discussion around Katt Williams, along with the names Pooh Shiesty and Gucci Mane, has now fully shifted into the aftershock phase, where every clip, every reaction, and every opinion starts to feel like part of a much larger puzzle, even when no one can confirm what the puzzle actually is. And this is where things get really interesting. Because once a narrative becomes this viral, the internet doesn't wait for clarity anymore. It starts building its own endings. People began predicting outcomes that don't exist in any official space. Some talked about industry shakeups, others mentioned hidden pressure being exposed, and a few even framed the entire discussion as a turning point in how entertainment stories are consumed online. But again, none of this is confirmed. None of this is verified. It's all interpretation layered on interpretation. Still, perception is powerful, and perception has already done its job here. In comment sections, you can see the split happening in real time. One group believes this entire discussion reflects how complicated the entertainment world really is, full of symbolism, metaphor, and misunderstood commentary. Another group sees it as an example of how quickly narratives can spiral when clips are taken out of context and amplified through reaction culture. And then there's the third group, the silent majority, that doesn't fully commit to either side, but keeps watching anyway, because the story feels too big to ignore. As the conversation continues, older interviews and unrelated moments from all three names are once again pulled into circulation. Not because they were newly relevant, but because the internet has now assigned them relevance retroactively. That's how digital mythology works. It rewrites context based on current emotion. And in this rewritten version, every past statement becomes a potential clue. Every old clip becomes foreshadowing. Every unrelated comment becomes evidence in a story that keeps expanding beyond its original boundaries. At this stage, even silence becomes loud. No new official clarifications are needed for the narrative to keep moving, because the narrative is no longer dependent on facts. It is now driven by engagement loops, speculation threads, and audience interpretation. And that is what makes it so difficult to contain. Meanwhile, commentary creators continue to shape the discussion with increasingly dramatic framing. Some present it as a cautionary tale about fame. Others present it as a reflection of how quickly narratives can escalate when celebrity culture meets algorithm-driven amplification. But no matter how it's framed, one thing remains consistent. The audience is hooked. And in viral storytelling, that is the only metric that truly matters. Now, stepping back from all interpretations, what we actually see here is something much simpler than the internet wants to admit. We are watching how modern digital storytelling transforms. A few comments into a discussion, into a theory, into a belief system and a belief system, into a viral narrative that feels real enough to debate endlessly. And once that transformation is complete, the original source almost doesn't matter anymore, because the story no longer belongs to the people in it. It belongs to the audience. And the audience has already decided this is bigger than just one clip, one conversation, or one moment in time. So where does it end? It doesn't, at least not in the way traditional stories do. Instead, it dissolves into ongoing interpretation. New videos will be made. New reactions will surface. New angles will be explored. And the narrative will continue evolving long after this moment fades from trending pages. Because in the end, the real story isn't about confirming what was said. It's about how quickly the internet turns uncertainty into a full-blown universe of meaning. And that universe keeps expanding. And now I want to hear from you. Because this is one of those stories where everyone seems to have a different interpretation, and nobody is fully sure where the truth begins or ends. Do you think this is just internet speculation getting out of hand? Or is there actually something deeper going on behind how these narratives keep forming around the same names? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you stand on this. And if you've been following stories like this, make sure you stay connected, because the next breakdown could shift everything you thought you understood about this situation. Like the video if you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more investigative-style breakdowns, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Because if this story has proven anything, it's that the internet is never really done with a narrative once it catches fire.